Hello, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel, depending on who you are. My name is Kai. In this video, I'm going to be talking about, like pets, mainly dogs and cats, and whether or not they can understand human language. I believe that they can. I have found some different research papers and articles and studies, about it. I have not read through them yet. I am not an authority on this topic at all. I'm not an expert. I just, I don't know. I've always found it interesting, and I'm a very observant person. And I tend to think a lot about evolution, how it works. I have looked into evolution quite a bit. I've excuse me. Excuse me. I have I don't know. I've been around a lot of dogs and cats. Not as many cats, but dogs. In high school, I used to go to our local animal shelter in my small city with my mother, and I would volunteer there. I would work with, like, directly with the dogs. I know some basic training methods for dogs. I've been around them all my life. I've helped with rescue, transport to rescues, or other, like, homes, rehoming animals, fostering dogs. So I'm in this video, I'm mainly going to be talking about the connection between dogs and human language. Simply because I just don't have enough experience with cats and observations of cats to be able to say as confidently as I would about dogs that they do understand human language, which I 100% do believe and think that they do. And I have quite a few different reasons for that. Like I said, I still haven't looked into or like read through the materials. I have a list of resources that I'm going to read through at some point. I will put those in the description of this video. So if you want to go and read through them, you can. For this video, I need you to have an open mind about this topic. There are a lot of people out there who are like, they don't think that they can understand human language at all, and the main basis for that conclusion from them is based on research, primarily behavioral research in dogs, mainly dogs. I say mainly dogs because cats are notoriously hard to do research on or study, especially domesticated cats. They just, I don't know what it is about them, but researchers have tried and tried and tried for decades to research both wild and domesticated cats, to study them. The cats just seem to defy the research that they're trying to do. They just seem to defy the studying of them, which is super interesting in and of itself. And I may make a video about that at some point. But that, if I do make a video like that, That one I will have read through research and other scientific postings and findings on that topic in general, because it's just super interesting and I don't know a whole lot about it. Now, into the main content of this video. Hold on. Also, if you're new here and this is the first video that you're seeing from me, I don't do any editing. I don't cut anything out. I just record and then post the raw video recordings. I think it's important for people to, not put on an air of perfection and to allow these like imperfect gaps and stuff. So, into the main content of this video, which is, can dogs understand human language? I'm going to start with talking about the evolutionary stuff that points towards the answer being yes, and then I will move on from there to other reasons why I say that they can. So we are going to cover the potential evolutionary reasons why I think this is the case. We're going to cover anecdotal stuff. We're going to cover like the concept of human language in general, and like just language in general, because there's so many different types of language. Like animals participate in language communication all the time. We just don't pay enough attention to notice it most of the time. Also going to go over some other reasons why I think it is the case, and why I think science hasn't been able to fully prove or disprove it yet. But anyways, I will, in these videos, I will probably ramble quite often and like go down tangents. It's just how my brain works. So evolutionarily, I should say, domesticated dogs have been around for like tens of thousands of years, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years. Like we domesticated wolves such a long time ago that most of the dogs that we have today, like if you have a dog, the dog in your house is like thousands of generations removed from wolves. Like it's such a long line of generations between the wolves that our ancestors domesticated and what we now consider dogs. And like it's been stated in the science communities, especially like anthropology, like behavioral studies, genetic studies of animals, all that kind of stuff, that animals who were evolving in close proximity to each other, especially animals that hold on. especially animals that were in symbiotic relationships with each other, would eventually evolve similar traits to the animals around them, because these traits allowed them the better odds to survive until they could reproduce. I cannot really think of any examples off the top of my head right now. Actually, yes, I can. No, I can't. I was gonna use the example of like elephants and the birds that, in Africa, or like uh, whales and sharks and the fish that come up and eat the parasites off them. But I actually cannot think of any traits. I don't really know enough about those animals to think of any traits that are similar or shared between them. So when our ancestors first started domesticating wolves, I do not think the wolves could understand whatever human language they were communicating in at the time. But they were incredibly clever and intelligent animals. So they had their own, and this is more so like speculation in a way than it is like factual, because there's no way for us to have known for sure any of this, but it is what makes the most sense, given the studies that we have done on modern day wolves and dogs. So these ancient wolves would have had their own ways of like vocally communicating between each other. So different sounds and calls and whatnot to express different intentions and environmental factors. So like if you look at modern day wolves and dogs, when they felt threatened, when they were like attacking, they don't bark as much, but they growl, you know? Barking is not always seen as a sign of aggression in dogs or wolves, but growling is almost always associated with some level of aggression. So the ancient wolves already had this structure in place of communicating between each other. So they had the ability to differentiate different tones, different sounds, and associate them with different things. And if you've ever like had experiences with like injured dogs versus a regular dog showing aggression, the growls that they do are different. It can be kind of hard to perceive sometimes if you're not really paying attention to it. But I have personally experienced like growling behavior from a uninjured, like physically uninjured dog, and from a physically injured dog, and the growls are completely different. Completely different. Like the tone is different. The way the growl is textured is different. Like the uninjured dog's growl will be like more threatening. It's like, hey, not only am I willing to fight you right now, I am completely capable of doing it if you don't back off. I will mess you up. I will fuck you up if you don't leave me alone. But then the injured dog's growl isn't like quite as intense. It's not quite as like, so like the best way I can describe it is the uninjured dog's growl makes you want nothing to do with it. It is one of the scariest sounds you can experience because it is full of active intent to cause harm the second you do something. Now, an injured dog's growl has more of a passive intent. It's still trying to get you to stay away. It still doesn't want you to come near it. But it's not inherently trying to cause a specific reaction from you in a way. I'm finding this really hard to explain now that I'm trying to explain it out loud. But their growl is, it's more motivated by fear, and it is more like a lesser warning. It's like, hey, I see that you're coming near me. I know I'm injured. You know I'm injured. We both know that if we got in a fight, you would likely win. I don't want the fight. I don't want to fuck you up. I just don't want the smoke. So I'm going to try and scare you away. But I know that this doesn't have to be the scenario that I'm presenting it as. Which is why usually if if you see an injured dog, like a physically injured dog, and you're like trying to go help it, you want to go help it, when it starts growling, if you take a non-threatening posture, if you speak in a softer voice, hey, I'm not trying to hurt you, I just want to help you. If you do these sorts of things, the growling starts to lessen. And if you start petting the dog and avoiding the injury itself, and you don't go near it, you don't put any pressure on it, you don't, touch it or anything, the growling will lessen and lessen. The moment that you try to let's say the injured dog has a broken or really scratched up leg from something. If you go to try and stretch it out or move it to get a better look or to feel it to see exactly what might be wrong, the growling comes back and it's more intense because the dog doesn't understand at that point. It understood before that you meant it no harm and that you were just trying to connect with it, which is usually what we're doing when we pet dogs. We're trying to connect with them. And that comes from an evolutionary process of neurochemicals and stuff like that, and it's mutually beneficial. and it's understood as such by both humans and dogs as mutually beneficial. But the moment that you start messing with that messed up leg, the growling comes back, and it's more intense. It's more aggressive because the dog doesn't understand why you went from trying to connect to now you're doing something to its hurt leg and it's making it hurt. And so it doesn't see the intent is still to help. It sees the intent as this person is trying to hurt me now. Like, this thing is trying to hurt me now. It is causing me pain. And so like it brings out the more aggressive growl because it's like, hey, just because I'm injured doesn't mean I can't try to fuck you up. You need to stop. I don't want you to do this. That hurts. And we know this is the case because generally, the first time that you mess with that leg, it's just a growl. Maybe it snaps its teeth together, but doesn't lunge at you. And so it's an aggressive display, but it is not aggressive actions. So in most people, their instinct when that more aggressive growl comes out, that more aggressive behavior comes out, they get startled and they let go of the leg and they try to, reassure the dog. They start petting it again, lulling it back into a more calm state. And then this second time that you mess with that leg, you get snapped at. It's a shorter growl. It is still quite intense. And it's that shorter growl and then an immediate snapping. Immediate, it snaps at you. It's like, hey, I gave you the warning. That hurts. Leave it alone, or I'm going to fuck you up. And if you do it again, after that, you're going to get bit if you're not quick enough to get away. You don't get a third warning. Generally, you don't get a third warning unless the dog has been through this before and it starts to recognize that the last time someone did this, they helped it out and they helped get the pain away. They generally won't bite at you. They'll snap again. But generally, a lot of dogs don't have that experience. So their intent on that third time is to bite you. And if you keep going after you get bit, you're going to get bit more. It's just going to keep trying to mess you up. Because it does not understand that your intent is to identify the problem so that you can then find a solution for the problem. All they see is, I gave this thing indicators that is not what they should do with me, and they're not listening. I have to make them listen and show them that I'm serious. So they've had these relatively complex, ways of communicating for a while. When early humans first started domesticating wolves, we more than likely, and this has been theorized by many scientists that have been studying ancient civilizations, ancient humans, stuff like that, that they weren't very different than us today. So they like to engage in art, cave paintings and stuff. They like to tell stories. A lot of indigenous tribes around the world still have stories that came from hundreds of generations ago, and they pass them down orally. They liked to sing. They liked to dance. They did burial rituals. They, they would participate in intoxicants when they discovered them. They were not very different from us. And the ways that they connected, we know for sure that the ways that they connected with themselves and other animals, especially like animals that they were domesticating, were extremely similar to ours, because we still do it. I mean, there's been a surge in the last couple of years of examples of the the concept that humans can pack bond with anything, including inanimate objects. That was like a huge evolutionary advantage for us, because if we could pack bond with a wolf, or if we could pack bond with a cat or a horse or something like that, it would increase the chances of our survival. Because now it's not just us trying to keep ourselves safe and keep ourselves fed and whatnot. We now have other animals helping us, and they're getting something out of it too. So they want to help us when they realize that this can be mutually beneficial. They want to help us. The main theory for how cats got domesticated nowadays is that they domesticated themselves, because they saw wolves who were hanging out with the humans. The humans were taking care of the wolves. The humans were, helping minimize the impact of parasites on and in the wolves. The wolves were getting more food. They were reproducing more. They, were not in as much danger. The humans were keeping them safe. And in turn, the humans were getting a lot of benefits from the wolves. The wolves were helping the humans hunt. They were helping them track. They were helping them navigate difficult terrain. The humans realized that they felt better when they spent time in close proximity to the wolves, when they pet them, when they, obviously it wouldn't have been as intense of a endorphin, production as we have now, because it was the early days, but it still would have been an endorphin related reaction in the brain that caused them to feel better. And the cat saw all this, and they were like, we're out here struggling to get fucking food and survive, and these wolves have it so easy. And cats have a completely different logistical processing ability than dogs. They solve problems very differently than dogs would. They hunt differently than dogs do. Dogs and wolves do. They have different grooming practices, all that, very different. So when the early ancestors of the modern day domesticated cat saw these things, they likely noticed that the wolves who allowed the humans to touch them more received more food, because that's kind of how it works, right? Even nowadays, if you want a dog to trust you, if you're rescuing a stray off the street, if you want it to trust you, you want to train the dog, whatever, you give it food. We have treats for them now, but you give the dog food, because these animals are mostly food driven, right? So the dogs that let the humans touch them more got more food, because that was like the humans' way of ensuring a connection with the dogs, because or with the wolves, because they likely noticed that wolves protected their mates and their pups and their pack more intensely than they did like other wolves, or other animals. So that's how they helped, ensure that that bond was being formed. So cats saw this and they're like, if I just let the human touch me, they'll give me food. And if I help out a little bit here and there, they'll give me food. So the cats, the theory is that the cats came in and they started letting the humans touch them. They started taking care of pests in the humans' campsites and stuff. So like mice and whatnot. And eventually led to domesticating themselves. Now, over the course of so many thousands of years, wolves and humans started evolving together, So, like, the humans with the wolves, they started evolving into better, like, hunting groups and strategies. And the wolves that were able to pick up and create associations between certain sounds the humans were making and certain actions likely survived long were more likely to survive long enough to reproduce. And that's how evolution works, really. Like, it's not, oh, the animal suddenly gains a new trait that that then gets passed down and passed down and passed down, and survival of the fittest. It's literally just a series of actions and behaviors that lead to a higher chance of surviving until they can reproduce. And that same process is why we as humans, why we have some instinctual traits or genetic traits that are kind of counterintuitive now. Like it's really hard to understand why this was ever a good thing, because the trait doesn't determine necessarily how long you live before you die. It just determines the probability of you surviving until you can reproduce. And then anything that happens after you reproduce doesn't matter. So like, a wolf could have had a trait where if it treated anything outside of the pack as a threat, anything at all, insects, other animals, humans, plants, whatever, if treated it as a threat to the pack in itself, it could theoretically survive long enough to reproduce. And that trait could, over generations, could become a genetic or like epigenetic thing that starts getting passed down, but that wolf could reproduce and then the next day after conception get killed or like fall off a cliff or something and die. Like, it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was reproducing. So wolves who were able to make the connections between the human sounds and what the humans seemed to be associating with those sounds likely survived long enough to reproduce. And I mean, it is very likely that they survived past the reproductive phase, um, and reproduced multiple times over their life. But humans have likely been talking or using vocal communication with their domesticated wolves for the entire time that the wolves have been domesticated, even during the domestication process, because that's how they knew to communicate between themselves things that's going on. Just like how like dogs use growling to communicate an undesired behavior from a human, even though I mean, logically it makes sense, right? So humans very likely would have done the same thing because that's the only way they knew how to communicate with this animal, you know? And when you spend thousands of generations speaking directly to another being, another animal, that is going to change the way that their brain is structured. That is going to change how they understand what is being communicated to them. Like, likely the first wolves that were domesticated didn't initially understand anything that the humans were saying to them. They just understood this this furless creature is making sounds at me that I don't understand, but it's not being threatening, it's not being hostile, and it's actually helping me. So these sounds are probably not bad sounds. And the same with the first wolves to be domesticated. If they because they would have had to suppress quite a few instincts to be domesticated. Like that is almost completely what happened. Otherwise, they would never have been domesticated if they had not suppressed their instincts to hunt the humans, to fight the humans. They would not have been domesticated. Humans would not have done it. They would have just killed them. And that's likely what happened. Is the first wolves that were domesticated, some of them were probably injured or killed by the humans because they showed too much aggressive behavior towards the humans. And so and they likely used different tones of sounds, different communication sounds than what they were using for the wolves who were suppressing their instincts and not being hostile, like when they were feeding those wolves. So think about it this way. When a dog attacks a person nowadays, or when they start aggressively barking or growling at a human, the first thing the human does is they adopt aggressive language, tones in their speech, and body language as well. So, like, say a dog is about to start attacking you, your first instinct is going to be, hey, knock it off, stop. Especially if it's your pet, that's almost immediately going to be your reaction. And so the wolves likely started associating those tones with undesired outcomes. Uh, the thought process may not have looked exactly like this, but I imagine it would have been similar to, like, and I'm using human language and concept and reasoning to describe this, but it likely wouldn't have been in this exact format, but something along the lines of, I growl at the human makes aggressive sounds back. I lunge at the human makes aggressive sounds and hits me. Or the human makes aggressive sounds and then killed another wolf who did this. So I don't want to do that, because I want to keep getting food. I want to keep being safe. So that's likely what happened. And over time, they would have, learned more associations between sounds and different things in the environment and actions and behaviors and stuff. And yeah, over thousands of generations, that's just going to get stronger and stronger, because the dogs who could understand these things, the dogs that could make these associations, the wolves, they lived longer. They reproduced more. And so that gets worked into the genetics of the animal over time. Now, another thing that I see people say often when they try to dispute the fact that dogs can understand human language is that when you see these videos of, like, the dogs with the talking buttons, or like training videos of dogs, they say that it's just conditioned behavior, because over time you have, like, taken this one sound that they hear, and every time that they hear that sound, a certain thing is introduced. So we use the good old-fashioned, like, the classic example of Pavlov, right? If you're not familiar with Pavlov, what he did was he did these experiments with dogs where he took dogs, and every time that he fed them, he would ring a bell. And after a certain amount of time, he started not giving them food or anything. Like, he would just have them laying down, sitting down, whatever, just chilling. And then he would ring the bell. And he noticed that the dogs would go to where, like, the food bowl. Like, they would go to where he was feeding them, and they would wait there for the food to come up. And so they learned to associate the sound of the bell with food being given to them, or more than likely food being available is the most likely association that was made. And so when people see these videos of like dogs using the talking buttons, they say, well, that dog isn't actually understanding the words that it's using. It just knows that this button creates a sound that leads to a desired outcome. So like if the button that they push makes, says walk, they know that that button leads to them getting a walk, usually. The reason why I don't think this is a good way to dispute that dogs can understand human language is because that's how all language works. All language is combinations and series of sounds that is mutually agreed upon by the people who speak that language, that these sounds mean these things. So like hand refers to this. Glasses refer to these. Mouth refers to your lips, your tongue, your teeth. Everything in this area is the mouth. But we didn't come out of the womb knowing these things, right? Like if the English language or Mandarin or like Russian or Tagalog or any of these languages were inherited, then I'll pick one and use it as an example. So let's say Mandarin. If Mandarin were an inherited language, every human being that was born, not just in China, but around the world, if this was an inherited language by humans that came about through thousands and like tens of thousands of years of evolution of humans, every human being would come out of the womb understanding and speaking Mandarin. And you would have to put in significant effort to teach the child a language that's not Mandarin. So the different languages are not inherently known by humans when they're born. We are taught them. We learn them. How do kids begin speaking? Their parents and other people around them, but mainly their parents, because like babies look to their parents to learn how to do things, that has been proven. They will look to their parents before they look to any other human being to learn stuff. So they learn from their parents and their environment these sound associations. It's like most kids' first word is like mama or dada or something like that, because their parents refer to themselves as that, and so like if it's mama, the baby has usually been spending the most time with the mother, and the mother refers to herself as mama. Mama's going to do this, mama's going to do that, and then she does the thing. So that creates the association of this parent and that has been doing stuff with me and for me is mama, but that's a little more advanced. Like it doesn't start out like that. It's just mama, and it's not really fully associated with the parent at first. So like if you've ever been around a child who has said their first word, and that's the only word they know for a while. You've seen this, where every person that they run into, they call mama. They say mama. Like, they know that mama refers to people. It's not like a bottle or a hand or, some other thing. It is a sound that describes people, is what they understand it as at first. So everyone is mama if that's their first word, because they got that, positive reinforcement, like, yes, yes, mama, mama. So everyone is mama to the baby at first. And then as they call other people mama, they get negative feedback from that. So, like, if they call their father mama, the father's like, no, 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 I'm not mama. No, 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 not mama. Dada, dada. And so, but then when they say mama to their mother, they get positive reinforcement. So that teaches them over time that this specific person is mama, no one else, this specific person. But then even that is not entirely correct, because once they make the association like that, they get to that point because they've been calling everyone mama, and people keep giving them negative feedback on that, especially the father. And so then they go from calling everyone mama to all women mama. Every woman they see is mama. Mama, 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 but not any men anymore. Because they know that mama is not for what they see as men, or a male figure. And then they still keep getting that negative feedback from other women that are not their mother, until finally the association is made that mama is this person. No one else, just this person. And so language is learned, It's it's not inherent. And if you think about it, think about your native language. You can understand most anyone who speaks your native language, regardless of if it's their native language. Like, you can understand most of the things that they're trying to say, even if it's not exactly grammatically correct, or they're not using the right form of a verb or something. But you kind of understand what they're trying to say. So we'll go back to Mandarin. We'll use Mandarin and English for this example. So for me and anyone else who English is their native language, their first language that they learn, when we hear someone speaking Mandarin, it's like, what the fuck is that? What are they saying? What are they talking about? It just sounds like gibberish. Our brains don't understand, because we weren't taught those sounds and their associations. We were taught English sounds and associations, but not Mandarin. And the reason I'm using English and Mandarin is because there's over a dozen languages that all came from Latin. A lot of the English language came from Latin or other Latin-based languages like French or Spanish. So I'm not using any of those, because we would still understand some of the words that are said, because they're so similar to the sounds that we use to describe these things. I'm trying to think of, okay, so in English, for the month of May, we say May. In Spanish, it's Mayo. Mayo. it's a similar sound. It came from like the same word essentially. And so like if someone says mayo in Spanish, there's a good chance that you're going to understand that they're speaking about the month of May. French is a very interesting one. I'm not going to get into that, but that that also, leads to the fact that the languages are learned and that they can be learned because all it is sound association. And so if you take a puppy, like a newborn puppy just weaned off the mama, and you start speaking to it like you would a human child, it's likely not going to be able to understand really complex sentences and sentence structures and stuff. But you're going to see some level of like comprehension and understanding of basic sentences, basic sentence structures and grammar and stuff, Like um I've personally seen dogs that were raised from pups by people, and they reacted differently to different forms, like different grammatical forms of the sentence, let's go for a walk. So like, do you want to go for a walk? And if they do, they'll get really excited. And if they don't, they won't react really. Like they'll just kind of be like, you know? Um you can say, I'm going for a walk, and they'll have like that same kind of like different set of reactions depending on how they're feeling about that at the moment. Like it so I think it's very, I think it's ignorant in a way, not like in the negative connotation that ignorance is used today. But I do think it's ignorant to say that just because dogs are a different animal from humans means that they cannot understand human languages in general, And another thing that like makes me believe that they can is the fact that you can train a dog in commands in English and it will follow those commands in English, but not the same commands in any other language. Or you can train them in German with German words and German sentences, and they will only respond to the German words and sentences for those specific actions. So like, if I had a dog and I trained it to sit and then lay down, if I did that in German, and the like I only used the German words for sit and lay down around the dog, if I told it to sit in English, it wouldn't do it. If I told it to lay down in English, it wouldn't do it. It would only respond to the German words, which means they are learning these associations the same way that we do, albeit in simpler forms, maybe, but they're still learning it. Let me see. I'm trying to think what else there is that leads me to think these things. But I went over the evolution stuff. I went over like what languages and whatnot. Hmm. I don't know. I think honestly, I think that might be it for now on this subject. Um. Oh, actually, I'm gonna bring up an example that is with a cat, but I have seen it with dogs as well, and it's with the talking buttons things that have been like becoming more and more popular with pet owners in the last few years. And that is so the reason that I even decided to make this video in the first place is because last night I was going through YouTube Shorts. Hold on, let me light up another cigarette. So I was going through and I was watching YouTube Shorts, and I don't like just scroll through shorts. I don't go to the Shorts tab and just scroll through. What I do is what I like to do because it keeps me from getting stuck in that loop as much, and it's easier for me to get away from the doom scrolling when I realize it. Is I only watch the YouTube Shorts that show up on my YouTube homepage. Um, and so I'd seen this video, and it was one of those like Minecraft parkour videos where they read like Reddit posts and stuff. And this one was talking about this person's cat. They have the talking buttons for it, and they added a vacuum word button because the vacuum would often cause the cat a lot of anxiety and stuff like it does for most animals because you know they understand communication, but it's often hard for them to have it's like it's hard for them to break the association between certain like sounds and the sense of danger. So like when the vacuum comes on, it's very loud, and it you know that loud sound really freaks them out because they weren't expecting that loud sound. And you'll see like there's dogs and cats and stuff that have been living with their human for most of their life, and at a certain point they stop reacting so strongly to the sound of a vacuum in particular because they start learning that that sound doesn't mean there's danger. There's no danger involved with that sound. It's just the human is doing something weird with this thing and it makes this weird, really loud sound and whatever. It's not a worry, so they don't worry about it. But so this person introduced a button for the word vacuum for their cat so that they could let the cat know before they started vacuuming. And like and the cat like started to showing the typical association of every time they pulled out the vacuum the cat would hit the vacuum button. But then the cat started doing something very interesting where it started hitting the vacuum button for things completely unrelated to the vacuum. Like the vacuum wouldn't even be in the room. So like they gave the example of if the cat hit this button that says snacky, which is the word that they were using for treats with this cat. If it hit the snacky button, indicating that it wanted a snack or a treat, and the human said no, they would hit the vacuum button. Which is really interesting and kind of weird because that button, the main association with that button wasn't like displeasure. It was anxiety and like distress. So if it hit snacky and the human said no, it would hit the vacuum button. But if it hit snacky and the human gave them a snack, it wouldn't do it. And then the human said that at one point they had some kind of like spicy Indian type food, and the cat snuck a lick of it while they weren't paying attention. And immediately the cat ran to its buttons and it hit snacky vacuum, and it did it multiple times. And so like that indicated not only to the poster of this Reddit post, but also to myself, that the cat wasn't just using the button to express like anxiety about the vacuum. It was using it the same way that we would use a curse word. Especially like curse words like shit. We use that word typically to express like disappointment or displeasure with a certain thing. So like you eat some food and you really don't like it and it really doesn't taste good. You're like, this food is really shitty, And so that's like the same thing that the cat did. It tried the food hurt its mouth and didn't really taste super good. So the cat was like, snacky vacuum. This snacky is really vacuum, bro. Like, because in the cat's mind, vacuum didn't just mean this object that makes a really loud sound that stresses me out. It's this thing I don't like. And this sound means I don't like something. So that jump in association is much, much more than just simple like conditioned behavior or association. Like that shows like an actual understanding beyond just the direct association between the sound and the object or the thing, and that's how language evolves. That's how we got curse words in the first place. Like the curse words we use today, shit, fuck, damn, hell, like these are all words that were originally used for a completely different reason than we use them today. So like shit used to just mean poop. It was just another word for poop. Damn was it was like a verb of damning you to hell. Like damning you, like condemning. Hell was a place. Hell was it described a very like unpleasant place where you experience very unpleasant and torturous things. Fuck was like, sexual intercourse. And over time, we started taking these words and associating them with other things that in our minds were similar, you know? Like, poop is, we don't like poop. We don't like the smell of poop. We don't eat poop. So if something we eat doesn't taste good and we don't want to eat it again, this food is shitty. Hell, hell had the same thing. Damn, was, like I said, it came from condemning. It wasn't like a verb in a way, and it has gained new meanings. Like, that's how these things start. That's how these things evolve. Let me see. What's another good example of this that isn't just a curse word? I'm trying to think of a good word to use as an example that's not a curse word that I actually like know kind of the etymology around. Actually, because I just looked into this earlier today. Homophobic, or homophobia, which is the original form of homophobic. Homophobia came from the compound word homosexual, which in and of itself is also another compounded word between homo, man, and sexual, which is pretty obvious. So they took the homo from homosexual, and this was coined in like the early 1900s. I think like 1940s. I think maybe no, or later than that. I think like 1960s. This term was coined by George something. I can't remember the name, his last name. But he was a psychologist. And initially, the term, and then phobia came from phobos, which is Greek, which means fear, fear, apprehension, or like aversion to something. So he took, because he was noticing that primarily men were showing these behaviors towards homosexual men. And so he coined this term homophobia to describe the, like, what he saw as a fear of being homosexual that was being projected onto the actual homosexual themselves, and an aversion to homosexuality. They did not want to be homosexual. They did not want to have homosexual relations. They did not want to even be presented with the fact that they could be homosexual. And seeing homosexuals, like homosexual men specifically, had this underlying implication that if that man can be homosexual, I could too. That's like, I don't want that. I can't have that. I'm afraid to be that because of the social perception of it. And so go from the 1960s to now we're in 2026, and homophobia and a homophobic person, what we associate with a homophobic person is completely different from what was being associated with a homophobic person in the 1960s. Like, it was more so like an insecurity driven, like, aversion to the concept itself of homosexuality, whereas now it is like an active, it describes someone who has an active, like, extremely negative reaction to seeing someone who is homosexual. And it doesn't just describe men anymore. Like, I have seen many men who have exhibited homophobic behaviors and actions towards like lesbians, you know? And that doesn't align with how this was being seen and expressed back in the 1960s. Like, now when you hear, oh, they're homophobic, your first thought is they are aggressively, violently opposing someone who is homosexual. Like, it's not just they avoid that person, they don't interact with them, they don't, no, now it's they're an awful person who is doing and saying awful things to these people, like going out of their way to do it. And so, like, that's how language evolves. And you have to have an understanding of, like, well, generally. So, like, it's not always like when a term starts getting used another way, it's usually the first person to use it that way has an understanding of the initial meaning and use of that word, and they are consciously choosing to use it in a different circumstance. And as they do and other people start adopting that usage of it, it starts to go through like a period of change where it can end up meaning something completely different, like in the homophobia example. But you have to have an understanding of language and an ability to comprehend language to use a word in a different way than the direct association that it was originally used for. So the fact that dogs and cats, I've seen this with the dog talking button videos too. So the fact that they are able to take certain words and use them in unrelated, like, not directly related situations from their initial direct association with that word indicates that they can comprehend and understand human language and what we're saying. It just may not be to the level of extent that we can. So, like, if I were to read a paragraph out of a book to a dog, it's pretty unlikely that dog is going to, or like, so that's a bad example. Let me rephrase this a little bit. If I were to say 3 sentences to a dog in one moment, it's not as likely that the dog is going to exhibit an understanding of all 3 sentences. So, like, for example, if I tell my dog, I'm going to take a nap, and then when I get up, I'm going to go smoke a cigarette, and then after I smoke a cigarette, we are going to go on a walk. It, unless you've been like working with that dog and like raised it from a pup, and you've like it's been able to learn all of the associations of what you just said, it's likely only going to understand and show the understanding of like one or two of those concepts. So like the nap, the nap part, it may understand and like show an understanding of, because it may like its eyes may droop a little bit. I've seen this happen. And then we are going to go for a walk. It will understand. And like you'll know this because dogs often, when you say we are going to go for a walk, they'll bring you their leash. Or if they want to go for a walk, they'll bring you their leash. But I don't know, man. It's just humans have spent so long now doing everything they can to separate themselves as completely different and unique beings from other animals, that at some point we stopped paying attention to the actual animals themselves and their ability to understand stuff. And so now it's to the point where we have, as a whole, I'm not talking individuals, but as a whole, the entire human race has created this level of, and this is starting to break down more, and it's been in the process of this thought process and concept being broken down by science more over the last couple of decades. But we conceptually separated ourselves from other animals so much so to the point that most people cannot even begin to comprehend the concept that other animals could have just as complex or even more complex like communication styles as us, you know. And we used to understand this. We used to, a long time ago, way back when it like before the hunters and gatherers, like when it was still very like like shit, what's the term, like when we moved, when we had very temporary like very temporary like camps and stuff, we used to understand that animals were just as complex, like other animals were just as complex as we are, and that they have their own communication styles and that they have their own emotions and feelings and stuff like that. And I'm very glad that scientists are starting to rediscover this because I think part of the issue that we have as humans in today's world is that we've removed ourselves so much from the natural order of things that we are causing ourselves so many extra problems that we shouldn't have. We really shouldn't. Like, so like anxiety disorders, we shouldn't have these. And if you look at like uncontacted tribes, or like native tribes around the world that were allowed to keep their culture, there's very, very minimal mental health issues there. Like very, very minimal. They have almost no like illogical anxiety. Like they have almost no depression, because they understand that these things are a result of us removing ourselves from the natural order of things. Anxiety itself is a misallocated fear response, which is fear is an instinctual response. This was a trait that was evolved over time because it kept us alive, you know? And now, so, and I can make a whole other video on this, so I'm going to try to keep this super short. But anxiety is just literally like, science understands this now, psychology understands this now. Anxiety is a misallocation of fear. So what is fear? Fear is a response to an imminent threat that sends the body into the state where you fight, flight, freeze, or freak out. And so basically what happens when you experience fear is you recognize the imminent threat. Your body does a number of things all at once. So it floods with adrenaline. It floods with let's see, what else is it? So it floods with adrenaline. It floods with some other neurochemicals that cause literal physiological reactions. So your heart starts beating faster, which is pushing more blood through your body quicker. Or not more blood, but it's pushing the blood through your body quicker. And if you remember anything from like your middle school, high school science classes, the faster something moves, the warmer it gets, and anything else that it's interacting with gets as well. So if you take your hands and you rub them together really fast, they'll get really warm. So your body temperature, your core temperature rises, your blood starts being pumped quicker, your peripheral vision narrows to like 30 degrees from the point in front of you. So all you can see is what is in front of you, because that's all you need to see when you have an imminent threat. Your respiratory rate increases. Your muscles tense. So the respiratory increase is bringing more oxygen into your system, which allows your brain to think quicker so that you can react quicker. The quicker your thoughts go, the quicker that you can perceive things, and the quicker that you can perceive things, the quicker you can react to them. The muscles tensing is also in preparation of engaging every fast twitch fiber to react quicker. The adrenaline also dulls the binding of pain reception. Like it literally, you don't perceive any, like, most of inflicted pain until after the adrenaline goes away. That's why when you're in a traumatic incident, like physically traumatic incident, like a car wreck, um, people will, like, people walk out of car wrecks all the time that they should not be walking out of, because they literally cannot feel the pain. But the moment the adrenaline runs its course and is not in the body anymore, you start feeling all that pain. But if, like, pain can be such a debilitating experience that if it wasn't suppressed in that moment, you wouldn't be able to do what you need to do to either get away or kill the threat or whatever. But now that we have, like, permanent structures, we don't have to worry about, like, other predatory animals, like, attacking us all the time. That instinct for fear is still there. We still have the capacity to be afraid, but there's not always, like, a perceivable image, like, or like, there's not always a threat to your life that you can see anymore. So, like, most people never have a run-in with a bear, but they'll get anxious about making a phone call, because the brain only knows how to do instinctually certain things. And when there's nothing there anymore, like, and there hasn't been to allocate this emotion to, like fear, it starts finding things, especially if, like, there were very turbulent experiences growing up or traumatic experiences growing up that train the brain. This is how most anxiety disorders develop, that trained the brain into associating fear with yelling, or fear with, I don't know, making phone calls or something. It's going to, even at the thought of these things, it starts perceiving these thoughts as actual real threats to you, and it starts that fear response. But because you can't see it, you don't, like, the brain doesn't know what the fuck to do. So it starts feeling this fear response, but there's nothing in, like, so I have an anxiety disorder. It used to be really bad. And I remember a lot of times when I would go into panic attacks, nothing happened around me. I was thinking about a situation. And those thoughts created the anxiety. And when the anxiety doesn't have something physical to attach itself to, the brain wigs out. It's like, what the fuck? What are we being afraid of right now? And so it starts, like, it tries to make sense of it. It tries to create a logical reason why you're experiencing that fear response. And so it starts creating more thoughts that align with the fear response. And then if you can't break yourself out of that, it keeps cycling, because if there's no physical threat to see, there's no physical threat to get away from, which means you can't get the environmental indicators that the threat is gone. So it keeps cycling this, and it keeps running the fear response until it manages to find a way to indicate in some way the threat is past. And at a certain point of this cycling, the brain gets overloaded and it causes like an extreme physical reaction, which is what a panic attack is. And usually after the panic attack, give it like an hour or two after, you're relatively fine. And that what happens, I think, I don't know this for sure. I haven't looked into this part of it specifically, but I think what happens when you have that panic attack is at some point the hyperventilation, so that breathing cycle that is super quick, it does one of two things. It either creates a so it does one thing for sure, and this one thing I think leads to two different outcomes depending on how it happens. But it creates a stronger than normal concentration of carbon dioxide in the lungs and in the blood, because you're breathing in and out so fast that you're not getting all of the oxygen from the air as you breathe in. Like, it's just, you're not getting as much as you should be getting from the breath in, and you're not fully expelling all of the carbon dioxide before you breathe back in. So when I breathe in like this, so when I breathe in like that, I am breathing in a pretty good amount of oxygen that is being brought in, separated out from all the other elements in air and by the lungs, and then that oxygen is then sent into the bloodstream. The bloodstream takes that oxygen to the different organs, brain, whatever. And then like the excess oxygen combines with the hydrogen from the air that you breathed in and the hydrogen that is produced in your body by your bodily fluids. Like, your blood has some water in it, which is H2O, which is 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. And, or no, carbon dioxide, my bad. So not hydrogen, but carbon in the body. And they combine into carbon dioxide. So di meaning 2, oxide being like oxygen in a way. And then that is breathed out. So when I breathe out, all of that is mostly carbon dioxide, and it's a good amount leaving the body. But when you're hyperventilating, you're not completing a full cycle of breath between each breath. So like when we breathe, it's and then there's a pause, and then so we're giving the body the time it needs to absorb the oxygen and then get out all the carbon dioxide that is the byproduct of breathing in and consuming the oxygen in our respiratory system. But when you're hyperventilating, the carbon dioxide isn't even all the way out of your mouth before you're breathing back in. The same with the oxygen. Like, the oxygen isn't even all the way in your lungs before you're breathing back out. So I think what happens is one of two things, depending on how long the hyperventilation goes for and whatnot. But the basis is that you're getting too much carbon dioxide into your system, and essentially getting a very, very mild case of like carbon dioxide poisoning. Like, it processes itself out very quickly because it's not a super high concentration of carbon dioxide. But the symptoms of carbon dioxide poisoning are drowsiness, uh, incoherence of thought, lethargy, and like a few other things. So when you're getting that massive like when you're getting that concentration of carbon dioxide and you're not getting enough oxygen, essentially you're getting like a really, really mild case of carbon dioxide, which is causing you to either pass out, like people often pass out, like go unconscious from panic attacks, and then when they wake up they're fine, or you're not getting to the point of passing out, but you're still getting that concentration of carbon dioxide, and it is slowing your thoughts, breaking down the coherence between them. So that's like breaking that cycle of really fast racing thoughts that are not fully logical, which is part of what's driving the panic attack in the first place. And then you're getting like physically like drowsy, you get really tired, and that breaks the fear response cycle, because if you can't think coherently and quick enough, you don't have anything to drive that panic attack anymore. And that's why you'll see people who have a panic attack who don't pass out, and then as they're hyperventilating, the cycle of breathing will start to gradually slow. They'll start to become more calm. So they'll go from to and then eventually they'll go back to a regular cycle of breathing. They become calmer. And I mean, they're going to be tired and lethargic because that takes a very strong physical toll on the body. Plus the carbon dioxide that we just talked about, it's creating like this exhaustion in the body. And but then like within an hour they're okay. Like they're fine. They're not freaking out anymore. They're just chilling, you know? So yeah. That was a bit longer than I meant for it to be. I'm probably going to make a video about that sort of stuff at some point. But until then, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you stick around for the next video, whatever it is. I really enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. I find it super interesting, and I like sharing stuff that I find interesting and educating people and whatnot. So, if you want, let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Please try to be respectful and not project your own negative shit onto me. I know people are going to do it anyways if this video starts getting traction, but just please try not to. And yeah, I hope you have an easier day or an easier night or an easier week, whatever it is. And I will see you in the next one.